Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today. Look, if you're a focused learner hoping to uncover the secrets behind one of the most thrilling, high-stakes eras in chess history, well, you have landed in exactly the right spot. Today, we're diving headfirst into a historical journey, covering the most swashbuckling opening in chess, the legendary Evans Gambit. And we'll see exactly how it connects directly to the mechanics of a truly devastating picturesque checkmate. We're going to unpack how a wild 19th century invention literally transformed the board from a quiet, polite parlor game into an arena of spectacular tactical art. Here's our quick game plan for today. We'll kick things off with a captain's swashbuckling invention, then break down the anatomy of the gambit. After that, we hit the big question: to accept or decline. Next, we'll look at the scientific defensive backlash, dive right into the art of attack, and finally wrap up with the evergreen legacy. Let's get right into it.
First up, Section 1, a captain's swashbuckling invention, the birth of the Evans Gambit at sea.
To really grasp the DNA of hyper-aggressive chess, we got to travel back to London right around 1826. Picture this. A Welsh sea captain and inventor, William Davies Evans, is on shore leave. He sits down at the board against Alexander MacDonald, who was, one of the top players on the planet at the time, and just unleashes this radical new concept. It wasn't just a new move, it was a totally fresh philosophy. He sacrificed material to instantly set the board on fire. And this opening went on a massive hero's journey. After that 1826 invention, it got thoroughly road-tested in the epic 1834 match of the 19th century between MacDonald and Charles de Labourdonnais. Because chess was shifting from a casual pastime to a cutthroat competitive sport, ideas like this spread like wildfire. By the 1850s, the genius Paul Morphy took the gambit into its golden age, perfectly blending its speculative, wild nature with rock-solid positional play. But hold that thought, because as we'll see, the 1860s brought a huge paradigm shift with Wilhelm Steinitz.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, what exactly did Captain Evans invent on that fateful shore leave? Let's check out Section 2, Anatomy of the Gambit, breaking down the mechanics.
So, at its absolute core, a gambit is a high-stakes strategy where you voluntarily sacrifice material, almost always a pawn, right out of the gate in the opening. And you might be wondering, why on earth would you do that? Well, to buy time and space. You're trading a piece of wood for a rapid lead in development, looking to instantly seize control of the center. It's a speculative, adrenaline-fueled choice. You're basically making a bet. You're betting that the tempo and the attacking lines you gain are going to be worth way more than that single pawn you just gave away.
Let's walk through the exact moves that create this beautiful chaos. Step 1. White pushes the king's pawn 2 squares to e4. Black mirrors with e5. Step 2. White develops the knight to f3, eyeing black's pawn, and black defends with knight to c6. Step 3. Both players bring out their bishops to active squares, c4 and c5. And then, Step 4. White plays b4. Bam! This is the definitive pawn sacrifice of the Evans Gambit. White deliberately chucks a pawn right at black's perfectly placed bishop. It forces a reaction, buys a crucial tempo, and aims to completely bulldoze the center of the board.
The second that b4 pawn hits the board, the psychological pressure completely shifts to black. Which brings us to Section 3, to accept or decline, the defender's dilemma. The defender is instantly hit with this massive, looming question. What do you do when faced with that b4 sacrifice? Do you accept the gift, gobble up the pawn, and willingly step right into white's tactical minefield? Or do you decline it, playing it safe, but essentially letting white gain a ton of queenside space without a fight? Honestly, it's the most critical decision of the entire opening. It dictates the whole flavor of the game you're about to play. Black actually has a pretty wide landscape of options here. If you choose to decline, you pull the bishop back to b6. It's a super solid setup, but kinda unambitious, right? It lets white expand even further. Now, if you accept, you've got a few different paths. The stoneware defense drops the bishop to d6. It looks a little awkward, sure, but it powerfully reinforces the center at e5. Then there's Lasker's defense, which is this quiet, safe retreat to e7 to dodge all that heavy theory. But the main line, the one everybody studies, is pulling the bishop back to a5. This is brilliant because it pins white's c3 pawn to their king, temporarily throwing a wrench in white's dream of building that massive pawn center. But as wildly popular as the Evans Gambit was, every romantic era eventually runs into a harsh philosophical wall. That takes us to Section 4, the scientific defensive backlash, Steinitz versus Chigorin. This philosophical rift in 19th century chess is perfectly captured by two absolute giants of the game. On one side, we have the very first official world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz. Now, Steinitz actually started out as an attacker, but he evolved this incredibly scientific, almost twisted defensive style. He'd happily snatch the Evans Gambit pawn, set up these bizarre-looking defenses with his queen and knights, and literally suffer for his principles just to secure a long-term positional grind of a win. On the flip side is Mikhail Shigorin. He was a total throwback to the wild, swashbuckling days. Shigorin was a fiery, dynamic attacker who valued spatial advantage way over material. He'd happily unleash the Evans Gambit to try and rip Steinitz's dogmatic defenses to shreds. It was literally romance versus science fighting it out on 64 squares. But look, surviving the opening theory and navigating that positional philosophy, that's really only half the battle. The true ultimate goal of these open games translates directly into our next topic. Section 5, the art of attack, executing the checkmate.
The absolute key to managing this chaos is often the double check. Now, in a normal game of chess, a regular check can be blocked, or maybe the attacking piece can just be captured. But a double check? That's a check delivered by two pieces simultaneously, usually through a discovered attack. And it can only be parried by moving the king. There is no other way out. Because the king is absolutely forced to run, the pieces delivering that double check can be completely hanging, totally exposed to capture, but they are untouchable. It is, without a doubt, one of the most terrifying and powerful mechanics you can use in the game.
The legendary Grandmaster Savielly Tartakower summed this up perfectly. After he fell victim to a stunning queen sacrifice that set up a lethal double check by Richard Reddy, Tartakower actually said, "Better than any spoken word, this game illustrates the power of the double check." It really hits the nail on the head regarding the devastating psychological and tactical impact of forcing the enemy king into a corner, even if it costs you your most valuable pieces to do it.
This aggressive, sacrifice-heavy mindset directly fuels some classic, truly picturesque mating patterns. Take a look at Legal's pseudo-sacrifice. It exploits a bad pin by shockingly throwing away the queen, dragging the opponent into a forced mate. Then there's Damiano's smothered mate, which uses sacrifices to violently deflect the defense and corner the king. And Lucena's mate? It literally forces the enemy king to suffocate, blocking it in with its very own pieces via, you guessed it, another spectacular queen sacrifice. The whole point of the Evans Gambit is to blow the board wide open, so these exact types of tactical masterpieces have the space to breathe.
To truly see how the Evans Gambit and the double check come together into pure art, we need to look at one of the most famous games in history. Let's move to Section 6, the Evergreen Legacy, Anderson versus Dufresne, 1854. Played in Berlin in 1854 between Adolf Anderssen and Jean Dufresne, this specific run of the Evans Gambit is immortalized as the Evergreen Game. Right in the middle of incredible, messy complexity, Anderssen played this super quiet, unassuming rook move, rook to d1. Black actually thought they were winning here. They were threatening their own mate. But Anderssen's quiet rook move was bait. It was setting up a spectacular trap. Just 2 moves later, Anderssen unleashed queen takes d7 check, a pure, unadulterated queen sacrifice. The black king was forced to capture it, and by doing so, stepped directly into a fatal double check from a bishop and a knight. It dragged the king right into an inescapable mating net. To this day, it remains one of the most stunning examples of calculation and attacking beauty we've ever recorded. Which brings us to our final thought. The Evans Gambit didn't just win a few chess games, it completely transformed chess from a quiet parlor activity into a dynamic, swashbuckling art form that demands both deep calculation and serious courage. It teaches us that sometimes, sacrificing material is literally the only way to seize the initiative and paint a masterpiece on the board. So to all you focused learners out there, now that you know the history, the mechanics, and the sheer unstoppable power of the double check, when are you going to unleash it on the board? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep playing, and I'll see you next time.